You're on.
Well, I want to first say that it's my privilege and honor today to meet with you all. I want to thank you all very, very much for the time. Dewey, Nichols, you are, again, I have to pinch myself when I hear this, you are 89 years old.
79.
79. I don't want to add 10 years already.
No, not yet.
But 79, and I just cannot tell you how much I appreciate your time and your experience sharing with me. And Ken, the same with you. I appreciate your time here today. Dewey was one of South Carolina's first Porsche BMW, was involved with Porsche BMW in Spartanburg, one of the first dealerships here, as a general manager, and later on in years as owner in the organization, part owner. And what basically he and Ken are doing today are validating the huge documentation on this 911 Porsche that Dewey personally knew Mr. Ivy, the owner of the car. Ken's ward was the Greenville, South Carolina's one of their first Porsche dealerships, who was Leroy Cannon, is Ken's background, and the documentation is also in here with some of Ken's signatures on the paint blemish that had come up on the car. Dewey has an amazing background of working as a mechanic on all Porsche engines, and particularly with the 4-cam car, and knew Mr. Ivy personally, knowing him as a very meticulous, a very detailed-oriented professional, not only in his appearance in his cars, but also in his work ethics, and was surely a Porsche enthusiast as well. And by the way, Mr. Ivy, the owner of this Porsche car, passed away about a month ago. He was an electrical contractor here in Spartanburg. He owned Ivy Electric, and the main thing again is the amazing documentation with this amazing car. Dewey not only knew the owner, but he was also involved in the dealer installation with Brumos, or the air conditioning, as well as the records on the car that where the car was maintained in its early years through the dealership that Dewey actually was service manager of. So what we're basically the goal for this interview was for Dewey and Ken to validate the records, the letters that were transpired here through Porsche. And one of the things that they pointed out to me that was very interesting, that I've never seen before, is the document here with a dealer transfer. I've never seen this before, and they've explained to me with their knowledge that this is what this document here is, along with the original invoicing, what have you. The other thing that I have found very interesting is the fact that, and learned about how Porsche dealt with their recalls, or I shouldn't say, just in general how Porsche would work through the independent dealerships. But what Dewey explained to me is, for an example, was a light scrub on a fender and a door here that happened back in '81, and that Dewey's recommended body shop was Trotters here in Spartanburg, and there is an invoice here showing where Trotters did repaint, stripping and repainting on the car. So I've got to learn and validate the connections between the recommended independent dealerships, shops of their choice, and Trotters was one of them, and the documentation here is showing that Trotters, the recommended shop by the independent dealership was that Dewey is supporting that fact that Trotter's was their shop of their choice. So it's just a 3-inch documentation here showing everything. And the main thing, additional main thing for me that is interesting is the early years of where Gombert's serviced the car for Mr. Ivy. There's not any documentation here, but as to the breakdown, but that typically I've learned that just the stamping was done by Porsche maintenance outline as to whatever was done in this case it was a 12,000 mile service. You're documented with Dewey's signature on it at their dealership where they did the 12K and the looks like the 24K, the early years of service was done by Mr. Nichols' operation. So I've done all the talking. The short of what my goal was to, in representation of the car, it was to have these folks validate the paperwork, the documentation here, and Dewey, I'd like for you and Mr. Ward, if you would, to give me your thoughts as to what we've talked about as far as the documentation here.
Well, I think the paperwork says everything. You don't have to add much to it. Mr. Ivy was such a stickler that he as anyone can see, he had everything that you needed to know about the car that happened to it over the years, and he did, and not just with his car, but everything else he did, with the work he did for us electrically in our buildings. He was just he was a stickler. I mean, he wanted everything right, and that can be seen. The car, in my opinion, has been well taken care of. I don't think you can get better documentation. I can't tell you how good it is. You can look at that and tell it's a nice car, and I don't think that you'll find one with this kind of documentation anywhere else.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Ward, I know you didn't personally know the owner, but what do you think of the documentation that you've seen?
If I was looking for a car of that quality, the book would speak volumes on how good the car is.
Yes.
And that would be the Bible for that car.
Yes. Well, thank you very much. I'm in agreement. I've been dealing with Porsche cars for 43 years. I'll never replace this car. I surely have never seen one with this documentation, the history, and the car. It's all just amazing for me. Well, Ben, thank you very much for your time.
You're welcome.
You're welcome.